Good evening, everyone. I'm Archith and Thanks so much for joining us here on Gravitas. Tonight, we take a look at the H1B Visa issue and the changes U.S. President Donald Trump wants to do when it comes to immigration reform. We'll also take a look at the impacts to immigrant workers there in the United States, those who study, the impacts to spouses of those H1B workers, as well as the impact when it comes to those companies who hire foreign workers. We're going to be joined by a panel of guests, including Naveen Chopra, the chairman of the Chopras, John Ryan, a professor and fellow at LSE, as well as Dr. Gareth Price, a senior research fellow at the Royal Institute of International Affairs. So lots to discuss, lots of perspective when it comes to this controversial story. Of course, another day, another discussion about Donald Trump, but let's bring you some background perspective about how all of this unfolded. Well, now the United States' House of Representatives are all set to pass the High Skilled Integrity and Fairness Act. Now, this will change visa rules governing foreign skilled employees in the U.S. and is likely to change the way it impacts India's IT service industry. We're going to get to that in a moment and what impacts that means. But first, here's the breakdown.
This is the secret to some of America's most successful businesses. Thousands of highly skilled foreign workers that help overcome its domestic human resource shortages. But this is set to change. A bill in the House of Representatives and backed by the Trump administration aims to make foreign hiring much harder for companies in the U.S. If implemented, the reforms could shift the way companies like Microsoft, Amazon and Apple recruit talent and force wholesale changes at Indian tech giants such as Infosys and Wipro. Companies will have to hire Americans first, and if they recruit foreign workers, they will have to ensure that not only are they paid a lot more than at present, they would also have to be highly educated, including having a master's degree at least. For now, Indian companies are circumspect. Despite stocks of several IT companies tanking at the news on Tuesday, R. Chandrasekhar at NASSCOM, the body which looks to protect interests of Indian IT companies, spoke to WION over the phone.
Bills are often introduced to state a political position by the proponent of the bill and may or may not actually see a final passage.
This also represents a challenge to the Indian government, which had praised the bonhomie between Prime Minister Modi and US President Trump when they spoke over the phone. A Ministry of Foreign Affairs spokesperson confirmed that India had conveyed its concerns to the Trump administration. The new rules, when they will be effected, will impact workers from several countries. But as various studies have pointed out, it will impact Indian workers disproportionately. Bureau Report, WION.
All right, let's now go to John Ryan to get some perspective about this. John, thank you so much for joining us. Certainly a hot button issue. We keep hearing about Trump and his controversial moves this weekend, firstly with that ban on those 7 Muslim majority countries. And now this when it comes to H1B workers. Now we know that several Indian workers are going to be impacted. What can we make sense of Trump's policies yet again?
Yet again, we have to take him at his word on the campaign trail, really, because this is nothing new. If you were following Trump on the campaign trail, there was a feeling when he mentioned this earlier last year that maybe this would fritter away after he won a primary, and then he started winning more primaries and obviously won the nomination and the presidency. He's always had this in line, and he's put this policy front and center. And he was saying these things. I think the media is behind a curve here in a sense. They really have to look at what he's been saying on the campaign trail, in the presidential debates, in the presidential campaign. And nearly everything he's saying there is actually having a follow through in his policy making. It seems to be controversial. It seems to be a surprise, but when you actually look at what he's been saying over the last year, it shouldn't really be that much of a surprise.
Let's also talk about the impact this has to Indians. More than 50% of those who have H1Bs certainly impacts the Indian workers, many of them in the, of course, IT sector. And we know that Trump has continuously talked about making America great again and keeping jobs onshore. What happens to those workers, those who are currently on H1B visas, and those aspiring to make that move to the land of opportunity, those looking to possibly get employment now in the United States?
well, they might have to reevaluate their plans. I mean, there's a problem with this from the United States perspective. It's all well and good to actually put this forward, but there are not enough Americans actually to take those jobs in the United States. There are a lot of vacancies in the United States for highly qualified people that at the moment the American citizen cannot actually fulfill those vacancies. And the education system below the university level is in not a very good state. So there would need to be a complete revamping of the educational system below university level in the United States to address these problems. That's the first thing. And the second thing is that, these immigrants that are, to a certain extent being picked out as, from their perspective, they might be victim of circumstances, but a lot of these immigrants have actually created jobs in the United States. Now, when you listen to the support of President Trump's, the supporters there in President Trump's camp, they would say, yes, they're very low-level jobs, they're poor salaries. These immigrants who are coming in are actually affecting the job chances of our citizens. And this is not the only country that this is happening to at the moment. Obviously, the United Kingdom has a similar issue in Brexit. But also, if you want to go and study in the United States, it may be a problem. So, quite a lot of the recruitment in Silicon Valley is coming out of US universities, and quite a substantial proportion of them, maybe nearly 50% of the people that have been hired are foreigners. So, and quite a few of those are Indians who are very highly qualified and can fit into the job pretty quickly. So from an Indian perspective, this is for people who want to actually go over to the United States, this is a blow. We'll have to wait and see what actually happens with this from a congressional perspective. Obviously, there's been blowback from a lot of the tech companies of not being happy about what's going on. Well, we'll have to see. I mean, if indeed you wanted to get rid of the program, then you would have to look at the Immigration and Nationality Act and and what would happen there. So I think there are a lot of issues still to be worked out in the Senate, in the House of Representatives, and and also the business community actually coming in and saying maybe we may need to amend this to a certain extent. So there's a timeline yet before this really sort of takes effect. But obviously, for those people who are expecting that they would actually go into the United States, things are changing. But as I said earlier, this should not be a surprise. He was mentioning it on the campaign trail. He's been talking about this. And as with quite a lot of other announcements over the last few weeks, he's followed through on what he said in the campaign.
John, let me continue with you. We're going to hear from our other guests in just a moment, but you brought up a good point. When it came to the issue of students, many international students head to the United States to study, get the degrees in the STEM courses, of course, science, technology, engineering. And, now with this proposal, this bill sitting in the House of Representatives, certainly many students on edge, many students who are currently studying at many universities across the United States wondering about their future. What's going to happen? Are they going to be able to find jobs? Is it going to really be worth all that money that they have forked out to get a U.S. degree? And even folks here in South Asia, those who aspire to get a degree abroad, and now they're sort of wondering that million-dollar question, well, is it really worth for me to spend all that money, go abroad, and really risk perhaps not even coming back with a job with these restrictions when it comes to H1B visas? Sort of everybody's sitting on edge wondering what will happen. Let's talk about the student element of all of this and what that could mean for current students and prospective students.
Well, it's unintended consequences. I suppose it's this announcement's a bit in a certain extent the same as Brexit and the issues around visas in the United Kingdom. So you've got two countries which are very popular for Indian students who go there. They spend a lot of money. They spend a lot of money in those societies. So basically, where they go to, they pay the fees. Not only that, they're paying their living expenses and they're contributing to the economy, and they're getting a degree out of that. Now, that is in question, a high-paying job just for the sake of argument, in Silicon Valley or in Wall Street, is open to question now. And yes, I think people will have to make a judgment about that, whether they want the degree and they go back to India, or whether they want a degree or they go into other parts of Asia that they can use that degree, or parts of the European Union. That's a very, very difficult call because everyone's planning for that, and they're doing their exam results. They're making applications, and all of a sudden, out of the blue, from their perspective, there may not be a follow through for them to actually, get their professional development. And so that is a shock, and that is a consequence, and maybe an unintended consequence, and a consequence nevertheless for those students and the parents and everything else. And the amount of money that's spent, obviously, on sort of elite universities and sort of mid-size, middle reputation universities is not an insignificant sum of money. So, I think people will have to reevaluate their plans for the time being.
All right, John, we're going to come to you in just a moment, but let's give our viewers some perspective about the H1B visa that many people need to head to the United States who choose to go there to study or work. Well, the U.S. H1B visa, it is a non-immigrant visa. It allows companies there to employ folks who can work in many specialty occupations that require technical skills. We're talking about fields including IT, finance, accounting, architecture, engineering, math, science, and medicine. So some takeaways, the big 5 takeaways when it comes to the H1B visa. First of all, there's not going to be a minimum pay requirement for H1B workers. It's going to be hiked up to 200% to $130,000 a year minimum. So certainly that's a huge increase. Also, another questionable part of this proposal, no work visas for the spouses of those on H1B visas as well as L1 visas. Those are typically company transfers. There's also a 50% cap on foreign hires for U.S. companies, meaning they'll have to cap it at that limit and also prove that they need to demonstrate H1B skilled workers to do their jobs. So certainly a lot of restrictions, a lot of changes. Let's talk at some perspective when it comes to, we're talking about hiring, we're talking about many people who may require that H1B visas. Well, joining me now in the guest, we have Naveen Chopra, who is, of course, the founder of this organization. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
We appreciate that. Let's talk about this. Certainly a huge issue that's impacting certainly workers, especially Indian workers. Absolutely. More than 50% of them rely on this H1B. What can we make sense of that? Those who are concerned and sort of on edge, waiting for this bill to find out its future.
Well, that's really out of anyone's control. But frankly, my own perspective, and I think a lot of people would agree with this, is that the U.S. has shot itself in the foot, or is shooting itself in the foot with the policies that they are pursuing. Given the fact that there are real shortages within the U.S. education system and within the U.S. corporate system. Had it not been for those shortages, these employment opportunities would not have opened.
Right.
So while it's going to be a massive and is a massive disturbance to all of the Indians and indeed Chinese and other nationalities who have invested such large amounts of time and money in first contributing to the U.S. economy by going and educating themselves in case of the student visas, who then move on to job opportunities within the United States. So they are absolute net contributors into the U.S. economy. And in the case of workers, these are highly specialized workers who are required by the U.S. economy because of shortages in those areas. Yes, sometimes some instances of cost saving have also certainly taken place, and that is the key issue where the locals object. There have been reports that sometimes U.S. workers have been laid off and been asked to train their own replacements. And
H1B
for
workers.
Exactly. Right. So that's certainly going to create a backlash. And any part of the world, if that happened, those who are being exited for cheaper labor are going to object. But I'm confident that that's not the vast majority of what's happening. The vast majority of what's happening is that they actually need these people, without which their companies are not going to be able to be efficient or continue to be the cutting edge that they are. So what are the options? I mean, is it possible that some of these companies will shift base out of the United States? I don't know. I mean, it's everything is open, as John was saying. I mean, there's there's a lot of issues, there are a lot of questions. It's early days as yet.
Right.
President Trump is in a sense delivering on the promises that he's made. But is it really thought through? I'm not so sure. I'm not that confident.
A premature decision, or is it something to protect the interests of Americans? We'll have to find out. Let's now go to Dr. Gareth Price, who's also joining us, a senior research fellow. Thank you again for your perspective on this. Let me start with you again with this. This is certainly news that's concerning a lot of people, especially here in India, who rely on those H1B visas. And now this could certainly mean that they may no longer be able to work in the United States, and certainly a headache for many companies as well who rely on that skilled labor force, specifically in those technical areas of engineering, science, mathematics. What's going to happen to those workers as they sort of wait in limbo to find out what their future is? Your thoughts?
Yeah, I think as your previous speaker was saying, there's two completely different views. I mean, there's one view disseminated by Indian IT firms that there's a labor shortage. And then there would seem to be the view of the administration that is, by using Indian workers, they're undercutting local workers and marginalizing Americans. And I think I'm inclined to agree more with the labor shortage. And so time will tell, whether this policy is maintained, or there's been a tradition of policies, more extreme versions of policies announced and then marginally rolled back. And I would imagine if businesses start to be suffering, this is one where it would be rolled back.
All right, Gareth, while we have you as well, can you also talk to us a little bit about, the fact that there are many students? We had this conversation earlier as well, so we've sort of touched base on the those who rely on the visas to work there. We'll get to some of the other elements in a moment, but the student angle of it, we had a conversation about many people leaving and going to the United States to get that bachelor's or that master's degree for higher education, pumping in money locally to the economy there, and then now to only be told that, hey, there's a cap, and you have to make sure that you earn $130,000 to even get a job, and possibly a significant portion of those students who were relying on that H1B visa to get a job in IT or some of the other STEM sectors may have to go back to their own country. More than 50%, as we mentioned again, back to India. Certainly an impact to that population as well.
Yeah, I think we can give you some evidence from the country I'm speaking from, the United Kingdom, where earlier, if you studied in British University, you were allowed to stay and work for a period. And it looks very much as though that the period you're allowed to work in the United States is going to be cut back. So in the UK, as recently as 5-6 years ago, we were admitting 60,000 Indian students a year, and now that's gone down to around 10,000 a year. And you have an equivalent increase in students that are going to Australia and Canada, where students are free to work afterwards and which are actively looking for Indian students. And so I would imagine that based on that evidence that the US, which has been a popular site for Indians to go and study, will become less so, and other countries will pick up the slack.
All right, we're going to continue this conversation in just a moment, gentlemen. But for right now, we're going to take a quick, short break. But when we come back, we're going to get some reaction from some of the techies here in India who are weighing in on this issue, plus more analysis when it comes to H1B. Stay with us right here on Gravitas.